My name is Elena Voss, and 6 months ago, the people I loved most in this world buried me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. I know there are thousands of stories out there, but if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been replaced by the very people who promised to stand by you, then stay with me. This one might feel a little too familiar. If you're watching right now, drop a simple "I'm here" in the comments. It lets me know I'm not talking to the void. Let me take you back to the beginning. I woke up slowly, the way you surface from a dream that won't let go. The first thing I noticed was the smell, wood smoke mixed with rosemary, and something rich simmering on a stove. My body felt heavy, foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Every inhale sent sharp pain through my ribs. My left shoulder throbbed like it had been pulled apart and stitched back together by unsteady hands. A gentle voice reached me before my eyes could focus. "Easy now, child. You've been gone a long time." That voice belonged to Ruth, a woman in her late 70s who lived in a small, hand-built cabin deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. No electricity most days, no cell signal, just quiet, stubborn survival and an enormous heart. Her husband had found me washed up on the rocky bank of a creek miles downstream from the trail where I fell. They thought I was dead when they first saw me. I spent the first 2 weeks in and out of consciousness. Ruth fed me broth, changed my bandages, and spoke to me in that calm, steady way that only people who have seen real hardship can manage. She never asked too many questions at first. She simply let me exist until I was ready to remember who I was. When the memories finally returned, they came in quiet waves rather than one crashing flood. I remembered my name. I remembered my cedar house with the big porch overlooking the mountains. I remembered Marcus, my husband of 9 years, and the way he used to laugh at my terrible cooking. And I remembered Claire, my younger sister, who had moved in with us after her divorce and slowly become part of every part of our daily life. By the time I could sit up for more than an hour without the room spinning, Ruth could tell. Something heavy was weighing on me. One gray afternoon, she brought me a mug of strong herbal tea and sat across from me at her worn wooden table. "You ready to look for them?" she asked simply. I nodded. She had an old satellite laptop that worked when the weather allowed. The connection was slow, frustratingly slow, but it worked. My hands trembled as I typed my own name into the search bar, Elena Voss. The first result hit me like a physical blow. Local photographer presumed dead after hiking accident on Ridge Trail. There was a photo of Marcus at a small memorial service, eyes red, holding a picture of me. Standing right beside him, with her hand resting gently on his back, was Claire. She wore the soft gray sweater I had given her for her birthday 2 years earlier. I kept scrolling. 3 weeks after the accident, another headline appeared. "Finding love after loss. Marcus Reed engaged to sister of late wife Elena Voss." The photo showed them smiling in front of the vineyard where Marcus and I had gotten married. Claire's hand rested on his chest, and on her finger was my engagement ring. The one my grandmother had passed down to me, now reset with a larger stone. The mug slipped from my fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor. Ruth didn't say anything. She just knelt beside me and began cleaning up the pieces, while I stared at the screen, unable to speak. In that moment, something inside me broke and quietly rebuilt itself into something new. Not louder, not angrier, just clearer. I wasn't going to rush back screaming and crying. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. No. I was going to take my time. I was going to understand exactly what they had done. And when the moment was right, I would walk back into their lives without raising my voice and watch everything they built on my grave crumble. If you've ever had to swallow betrayal so deep it changed the way you breathe, type the word silent in the comments. I see you. I was becoming that kind of strong too. I stayed with Ruth for nearly 5 months. In that quiet cabin, surrounded by nothing but trees and time, I planned. Not with rage, but with patience. The kind of patience that only comes when you've already lost everything. This is the story of how I came back from the dead. Not to destroy them with noise, but with the simple, undeniable truth. And their perfect wedding day became the stage where that truth finally spoke. Before the mountain took me, my life looked almost perfect from the outside. I was 34 years old, running a small but thriving photography business that specialized in mountain homes and lifestyle shoots. Clients loved my calm, natural style. I had built a modest following online, and my coffee table books were starting to sell in local shops around Asheville. Marcus and I had been married for 9 years. We lived in a beautiful cedar home we built together on 5 acres of wooded land. Every evening we would sit on the wide porch, watching the sun paint the Blue Ridge Mountains in shades of gold and purple. I thought we were happy. Marcus ran a growing construction company that focused on luxury cabins. He was ambitious, charming, and always seemed to know exactly what to say. Claire, my younger sister by 4 years, had moved in with us temporarily after her messy divorce. At first, I was glad to have her close. She helped around the house, pitched in with my editing workload, and even started working part-time at Marcus's company as a project coordinator. Looking back now, the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Claire had always been the more outgoing one, quick with a laugh, comfortable in any crowd. I was quieter, more introspective. People used to say we complemented each other perfectly. I believed them. When she started staying late at the office with Marcus to finish client proposals, I told myself it was good for the business. When I noticed her wearing my favorite cream sweater without asking, I brushed it off. When Marcus began coming home, smelling faintly of her perfume, I convinced myself it was because they worked in the same truck all day. Love can be incredibly skilled at filling in the blanks with kinder explanations. That last month before the accident, something felt different. Marcus was more attentive than usual, bringing me coffee in bed, suggesting date nights, even talking about finally starting the family we had put off for years. Claire, on the other hand, seemed nervous around me. She avoided eye contact more often and spent a lot of time in her room on the phone. The morning of the hike, Marcus kissed my forehead longer than usual. "You sure you want to go alone today, Elena? The trail can get slippery after all that rain." I smiled, adjusting the strap of my camera bag. "I'll stick to the main path. I need those golden hour shots after the storm. The light is going to be incredible." He nodded, then added casually, "Just be careful on Ridge Trail, okay? Maybe take the lower loop instead." I remember thinking it was sweet that he was worried. I hugged him tightly, told him I loved him, and drove off with a full heart. The drive up the mountain was peaceful. Autumn had painted the trees in fiery reds and deep oranges. The air smelled clean and sharp after the rain. I parked at the trailhead, took a deep breath, and started hiking. My camera felt like an old friend against my chest. For the first 2 miles, everything was perfect. Then I reached the section near the ridge. The path narrowed. The rain had turned parts of it into slick, reddish mud. I moved carefully, one hand on the rock wall for balance. At one scenic overlook, I stopped to capture the valley below. Layers of blue-green mountains fading into the distance. It was breathtaking. I turned to continue upward. My boot slipped. It wasn't a normal slip. The ground beneath me gave way suddenly, violently. For one terrifying second, I was weightless. Then I was falling. tumbling through branches, rocks scraping my skin, the roar of the river below rushing up to meet me. I remember the sickening impact when I hit the water. The cold stole my breath instantly after that darkness. I don't know how long I was in the river. Hours? Days? The current carried me far downstream before Ruth's husband found me tangled in branches on the bank, barely breathing. Back in the cabin months later, as these memories returned, I realized something important. The fall wasn't just bad luck. It was the moment the illusion of my perfect life finally shattered. But even then, lying broken in a stranger's bed, I couldn't imagine the full depth of the betrayal waiting for me. I thought losing my husband and sister would be the worst part. I was wrong. The worst part was discovering they had already written me out of the story and were happily writing a new one with my money, my memories, and my future. If you've ever had the ground disappear beneath your feet, literally or emotionally, you understand how quickly life can change. One moment you're planning tomorrow. The next, tomorrow no longer includes you. That was the beginning of my real journey. Not the fall. Not even waking up alive. The real journey started the moment I chose silence over screaming. The moment I decided I would come back, but only when I was ready. The morning of the hike started like so many others. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of our cedar home, casting warm patterns across the wooden floors. I stood at the kitchen island, sipping coffee, my camera bag already packed and waiting by the door. Marcus came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist the way he had done 1,000 times before. "You're still going on that hike, right?" he asked, his voice soft against my hair. "Of course," I replied, leaning back into him. "The light after yesterday's rain is going to be perfect." He turned me gently to face him, brushing a strand of hair from my eyes. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. A careful tenderness that felt just a little too measured. "Maybe take the lower loop instead of Ridge Trail," he suggested. "I heard it can get pretty slick up there after heavy rain." I smiled and kissed his cheek. "I'll be careful, promise." Claire appeared in the doorway then, wearing one of my old flannel shirts over her leggings. She looked tired, but she forced a bright smile. "Morning, you two. Heading out already, Elena?" "Yeah, trying to catch the good light," I said. She nodded, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Tell me if you get any shots near the overlook. Might be good for the new cabin project." I didn't think much of it at the time. Just normal morning conversation between sisters. I hugged them both, grabbed my bag, and headed out with that familiar excitement I always felt before a solo shoot. The drive up the winding mountain road was peaceful. Golden leaves danced across the pavement. I played my favorite playlist and sang along, completely unaware that this would be the last ordinary morning of my life. At the trailhead, the air was crisp and smelled of wet earth and pine. I took a few test shots, adjusted my settings, and started hiking. The first 2 miles were beautiful, the trail winding through dense forest, sunlight breaking through the canopy in dramatic beams. My camera clicked steadily. I felt alive, creative, grateful. Then I reached the ridge section. The path narrowed significantly here, hugging the edge of a steep drop. The rain from the previous day had turned the red clay into a slick, treacherous surface. I moved slowly, testing each step, one hand staying close to the rocky wall for balance. At the scenic overlook, I paused. The view was everything I had hoped for. Layers of misty mountains stretching into forever. I set up my tripod and took several frames, completely lost in the work I loved. For those few minutes, the world felt perfect. I packed up, turned to continue the trail, and that's when it happened. My right boot lost traction without warning. The ground didn't just slip, it crumbled. One second I was stable, the next I was sliding toward the edge. I grabbed desperately for anything, but my fingers only found loose rock and wet branches. The fall was chaotic and terrifying. Branches whipped across my face and arms. I tumbled, hit a ledge hard enough to hear something crack in my shoulder, then continued falling. The final impact came when I slammed into the icy river below. The cold water stole my breath instantly. Currents pulled me under, tumbling me like a rag doll. I fought, but my body was already shutting down from pain and shock. The last thing I remember is the water closing over my head and a strange, peaceful darkness swallowing everything. I don't know how long I was unconscious in the river. The current carried me nearly 3 miles downstream, before it finally pushed me onto a rocky bank. That's where Ruth's husband, Harlan, found me the next morning while checking his trap lines. He thought I was dead at first. When I woke up days later in their cabin, I had no idea how much my world had already changed. I had no idea that while I lay fighting for life in the middle of nowhere, Marcus and Claire had already started planning my funeral. I had no idea they were already comforting each other in the bed we once shared. And I certainly had no idea that the hiking accident I thought was random bad luck had been quietly encouraged by the two people I trusted most. The mountain didn't just break my body that day. It revealed the truth I had been too blind to see. The first time I truly woke up, the pain was overwhelming. Not just physical, though every inch of my body felt bruised and broken, but a deep, disorienting fog in my mind. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know who I was for several terrifying minutes. A warm, wrinkled hand rested gently on my forehead. "Easy, child, you're safe. Just breathe." Ruth's voice was like an anchor, calm, steady, and full of quiet strength. She had kind blue eyes framed by silver hair pulled back in a simple braid. Her cabin was small but sturdy. One main room with a wood stove, a tiny kitchen, and a loft bedroom where I lay. The smell of herbal tea and simmering stew filled the air. It took me nearly 3 weeks to become fully conscious for more than a few hours at a time. My left shoulder had been dislocated and badly bruised. Several ribs were cracked. My body was covered in deep cuts and scrapes that Ruth cleaned and dressed with patience I still don't fully understand. She fed me broth, herbal teas, and soft stews made from vegetables she grew herself. During those early days, I drifted in and out of feverish dreams. Sometimes I saw Marcus's face. Sometimes Claire was laughing. Other times I was falling again, the cold river pulling me under. Ruth would sit beside me, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth and humming old Appalachian folk songs. She never pushed me to talk. She simply created space for me to exist. When my mind finally began to clear, the memories returned slowly, like pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to complete. First came my name, Elena. Then the house. Then Marcus. And finally, Claire. With each returning memory, a heavy weight settled deeper in my chest. One afternoon, when I was strong enough to sit up in bed, Ruth brought me a mug of tea and sat on the edge of the mattress. "You've been through something terrible," she said quietly. "But you're still here. That means something." I nodded, staring at my bandaged hands. "I need to get home. My husband, my sister, they must be worried sick." Ruth's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. She didn't say anything then. She simply nodded and let me hold on to that hope a little longer. The physical recovery was slow and painful. I had to relearn how to walk without dizziness. My shoulder screamed every time I tried to lift my arm. Ruth taught me gentle stretches and made me drink bitter herbal concoctions that helped with inflammation. Her husband Harlan would bring fresh fish from the creek and quietly repair things around the cabin while I rested. They were good people, the kind who help strangers without expecting anything in return. As my strength returned, so did the questions. Why hadn't anyone come looking for me? Why hadn't there been search parties? The cabin was so remote that even if people had searched the main trail, they might never have found me downstream. One rainy evening, after I managed to take my first short walk outside, Ruth finally brought out the old laptop. "The world moves on whether we're in it or not," she said gently. "Maybe it's time you see what's waiting for you." My heart pounded as the ancient machine slowly connected. When the screen finally loaded, I typed my name with trembling fingers. What I found shattered the last fragile pieces of the life I thought I had. The news articles. The memorial service. The photos of Marcus and Claire standing together. The engagement announcement that came just weeks after I disappeared. I sat there in complete silence as tears streamed down my face. Ruth stood behind me, one hand resting lightly on my uninjured shoulder. She didn't offer empty words of comfort. She simply stayed present while my world finished crumbling. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The sweet, trusting Elena who always saw the best in people died on that mountain. The woman who replaced her was quieter, wiser, and far more dangerous in her silence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry hysterically. I simply closed the laptop, looked at Ruth, and said with a voice I barely recognized as my own, "They think I'm dead. Maybe for now that's exactly what I need them to believe." The laptop screen glowed softly in the dim cabin light as Ruth stepped away to give me privacy. My fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment before I finally typed my full name, Elena Marie Voss. The search results loaded slowly, one line at a time. The first article was dated 2 days after my hike. Local photographer Elena Voss missing, presumed dead after hiking accident on Ridge Trail. There was a photo of me smiling from last year's business headshot. Below it, quotes from Marcus. "She was my everything. I can't imagine life without her." My chest tightened. I kept scrolling. A week later, another piece. Community gathers for memorial service of Elena Voss. The photo showed Marcus standing at a small podium, eyes red, with Claire right beside him holding his arm for support. She wore a black dress that looked new. Her expression was one of perfect grief. 3 weeks after the accident, the tone changed completely. Finding light after darkness, Marcus Reed engaged his sister of late wife. The engagement photo hit me hardest. They were standing in the same vineyard where Marcus had proposed to me. Claire wore a soft white sweater, smiling up at him with pure joy. On her finger was my grandmother's ring, the one I had cherished and planned to pass down someday. The article mentioned how they had found unexpected comfort in each other during their shared grief, and how they planned to honor my memory by building a life together. I read it twice, feeling strangely detached, like I was watching someone else's tragedy unfold. But the real blow came when I found the financial notices. My life insurance policy, the $1.8 million policy I had taken out 3 years ago to protect the business, had already been paid out. Marcus was listed as the primary beneficiary. There were public records showing large transfers to his construction company and several cash withdrawals shortly after. Claire had been added as a co-owner on several new business filings just days after the memorial. They were already planning luxury cabin developments, using my death as their foundation. I sat there for a long time, the only sound the crackling of the wood stove. Ruth eventually came back and placed a fresh mug of tea beside me. "Bad?" she asked quietly. "Worse than bad," I whispered. They didn't just move on. They were ready for this. Over the next few days, using the slow internet connection, I pieced together more of the picture. Old social media posts showed Claire and Marcus together at work events long before my accident. There were deleted comments and carefully worded updates that suddenly made sense. One particular post from Claire, dated 2 months before my hike, read, "Sometimes the person you've been waiting for has been right in front of you all along." It had dozens of heart emojis from mutual friends. I felt sick. But beneath the nausea and heartbreak, something colder and more focused began to form. I started taking notes in the small journal Ruth gave me. Dates, financial movements, inconsistencies in their stories, every detail I could find. Ruth watched me one evening as I wrote by lantern light. "Revenge is a heavy thing to carry, child." I looked up at her. "This isn't just revenge, Ruth. This is about taking back what they tried to bury with me." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then make sure you do it with clear eyes, not with a heart full of hate." That night, as I lay in the loft listening to the rain on the tin roof, I made myself a quiet promise. I would not rush back in anger. I would heal, I would learn, I would prepare. And when I finally stepped back into their world, it would not be as the broken woman they had left for dead. It would be as someone they could never bury again. That night, after closing the laptop, I didn't cry the way I expected to. Instead, I felt a strange, almost eerie calm settle over me. It wasn't numbness, it was clarity. The kind that comes when the last illusion finally dies. I lay in the loft, staring at the wooden beams above me, and let the truth wash over me completely. Marcus, the man I had built a life with, had not only betrayed me, but had likely helped orchestrate the conditions for my death. Claire, the sister I had protected and supported through her hardest years, had stepped into my place without hesitation. They were using my death as the foundation for their new beginning. The pain was sharp, but it didn't break me. It refined me. I thought about all the small moments I had ignored. The lingering touches, the shared glances, the way they both encouraged me to take more solo hikes because you need time for your art, Elena. I had trusted them completely. And they had counted on that trust. In the quiet darkness of Ruth's cabin, I made my first real decision as the new Elena. I would not run back immediately. I would not confront them in rage or tears. That was what they expected from the old me. The forgiving, understanding wife and sister who always kept the peace. No. This time, I would disappear completely. I would heal my body and sharpen my mind. I would gather undeniable proof. And when the moment was perfect, I would return. Not as a victim, but as the one person who could unravel everything they had so carefully built on my grave. Ruth sensed the change in me the next morning. She placed a plate of warm cornbread in front of me and said simply, "You've decided something." "I have," I answered. "I'm going to let them believe I'm gone, for now." She studied my face for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Good. The mountain didn't take you. Don't let bitterness take you either." From that day forward, my recovery took on new purpose. Every painful physical therapy session, every quiet evening writing in my journal, every conversation with Ruth became part of my preparation. I began to see my silence not as weakness, but as the most powerful weapon I had. I was no longer the woman who needed to be chosen. I was the woman who would choose her own ending. And their wedding, the one they were planning with my insurance money in the same vineyard where we once said our vows, would become the stage where that new ending began. Months passed in the cabin, and my body grew stronger with each passing week. By the 4th month, I could walk long distances without pain and use my shoulder almost normally again. It was time to reach out beyond the woods. Ruth's grandson drove me to a small gas station with payphones nearly 40 miles away. I bought a cheap burner phone with cash and dialed the only person I still fully trusted, Sophia, my college roommate and closest friend for over 15 years. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Hello? Her voice was cautious. Sophia, it's me, Elena. There was a long silence, then a sharp intake of breath. This isn't funny. Whoever you are, don't call again. Sophia, wait. Remember spring break senior year? We drove to Savannah in your old Honda and got matching temporary tattoos of tiny pineapples because we said we'd be sweet but sharp for the rest of our lives. You still have yours on your ankle. Another silence. Then came the sound of her crying. Oh my God, Elena, where are you? I told her everything I could in that short call. The accident, Ruth's cabin, what I had discovered online. She listened without interrupting, her breathing shaky. When I finished, she spoke with quiet determination. I never believed how fast they moved on. Something felt wrong from the beginning. Tell me what you need. Sophia became my lifeline. Over the next several weeks, using carefully planned burner calls and encrypted messages, she helped me gather information from the outside world. She hired a discreet private investigator using money I had secretly saved in an old account she could access. The picture that emerged was even darker than I feared. Marcus had been drowning in gambling debts for over a year. Private poker games, online betting. Thousands of dollars lost. My life insurance payout had cleared most of it. Claire had been romantically involved with him for at least 10 months before my accident. They had been planning the new life together while I was still cooking dinner for them. Sophia sent me scanned documents, screenshots of deleted text messages she recovered, and financial records showing large transfers. She also told me they were planning a big wedding in 3 months at Willow Creek Vineyard, the exact same place where Marcus and I had exchanged vows. They're calling it a celebration of second chances, Sophia said bitterly during one call. They're using your money to pay for everything. I listened quietly, taking notes in my journal. Every new piece of information strengthened my resolve. I wasn't collecting these details to explode in anger. I was building a foundation that could not be denied. Through Sophia, I also learned that a detective from the county sheriff's office had quietly opened a file on my case after some inconsistencies in the insurance claim raised red flags. He hadn't pursued it aggressively because there was no body and no clear evidence of foul play. That detective would become important later. One evening, after a particularly difficult call where Sophia described seeing Marcus and Claire house hunting together, I sat by the fire with Ruth. You're carrying a lot inside that quiet heart of yours, she observed. I'm not carrying hate, I told her. I'm carrying truth. And truth has its own weight. Ruth smiled faintly. Then make sure when you set it down, it lands exactly where it needs to. I nodded. My silence was no longer just survival. It had become strategy. The more information Sophia sent, the clearer the picture became. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan that had been in motion for a long time. Marcus's gambling problem had started small but grew rapidly. He hid it well. Separate accounts, late nights at the office, sudden business trips. Claire discovered his secret during late nights working together, and, instead of warning me, she used it as leverage to grow closer to him. She offered emotional support, then financial ideas, and eventually herself. Their motive was simple but brutal: freedom and money. With me gone, Marcus would collect the life insurance, clear his debts, and start fresh with Claire, the younger, more socially outgoing sister who shared his ambition for wealth and status. They wanted the luxury cabin development company, the big house, the image of a perfect couple who had overcome tragedy together. My existence had become an obstacle to that vision. The hiking trail suggestion wasn't random. Marcus had taken Claire there 2 weeks earlier under the guise of scouting locations. They knew the dangers after rain. He had gently pushed me toward that exact trail the morning I left, framing it as loving concern. Reading the recovered messages Sophia managed to obtain made my stomach turn. One text from Marcus to Claire 2 days before my hike read, "If she goes to the ridge, it could solve everything quietly, no more hiding." Claire had replied with a single heart emoji. I didn't rage. I read each message carefully, noting dates and details in my journal with steady hands. Understanding their motives gave me power. They weren't cartoon villains. They were selfish, greedy, and weak. People who chose the easiest path instead of doing the hard, honest work of ending a marriage respectfully. Claire's motivation ran deeper than I expected. She had always lived in my shadow, the quieter, more successful older sister with the stable marriage and creative career. She resented me for it, even as I tried to lift her up. In her mind, taking my place wasn't theft. It was finally claiming what she believed she deserved. The more I learned, the more my calm deepened. I wasn't preparing for a loud confrontation. I was preparing for a quiet reckoning. One cold evening, as I sat reviewing the latest documents Sophia sent, Ruth brought me a blanket and sat across from me. "You understand them now?" she asked. "I do," I replied. "They didn't just betray me. They convinced themselves they were entitled to my life." Ruth nodded slowly. "And what are you going to do with that understanding?" I closed the journal and looked into the fire. "I'm going to let them build their perfect world, and then I'm going to walk into it and show them how fragile lies really are." From that point on, my preparation became even more focused. I changed my appearance subtly. Darker hair color using box dye in Ruth's sink, simple clothing that made me blend into crowds, and a quiet confidence in my posture that the old Elena never had. I was no longer hiding. I was becoming invisible on purpose. And every piece of evidence I collected brought me one step closer to the day I would step back into the light. Not as their victim, but as the one person who could make their entire carefully constructed world collapse. With nothing more than the truth. With my body nearly fully healed, I turned my focus to becoming someone new. Not just on the outside, but on the inside. Ruth helped me dye my hair a deep chestnut brown in her old porcelain sink. I started wearing simple, unremarkable clothes. Soft sweaters, jeans, and comfortable boots that allowed me to move quietly. I practiced changing the way I carried myself. Shoulders relaxed, movements slower and more deliberate, voice softer. The old Elena was warm and expressive. The new Elena was observant, calm, and hard to read. I became a ghost in training. Sophia continued feeding me critical information. Through the private investigator, we obtained copies of financial transactions, insurance documents, and even some deleted text threads recovered from Marcus's old phone backup. I organized everything meticulously in my journal, and on encrypted drives Ruth's grandson helped me set up. Every piece of evidence was dated, cross-referenced, and backed up. I wasn't building an emotional case. I was building an unbreakable one. During this time, I also reached out carefully to Detective Harlan Graves, the officer who had quietly questioned the insurance payout. Using Sophia as intermediary, I arranged a secure call. He was skeptical at first, but when I provided specific details only I could know, his tone changed completely. "Mom, if this is really you, we need to meet in person eventually. But for now, stay hidden. I'll start building the official side quietly." That conversation gave me hope and structure. The legal side was slowly coming together. Meanwhile, I asked Sophia to observe and report on Marcus and Claire's wedding planning without getting too close. She sent photos and details. The venue, the guest list, the extravagant flowers, even the custom cake that cost more than my first car. They were spending my money freely, celebrating the life they had stolen. Instead of anger, I felt a cold, focused determination. Each new detail became another tool in my hands. One afternoon, while helping Ruth tend her garden, I told her about the latest updates. She wiped dirt from her hands and looked at me seriously. "You're changing, Elena. Not just your hair. Your eyes are different now." "I know," I said. "I'm becoming the version of myself they never expected to face." She smiled faintly. "Just remember, the strongest revenge is living well after they thought they destroyed you. But if you must face them, do it with truth, not poison." Her words stayed with me. I wasn't poisoning myself with hatred. I was arming myself with truth. By the end of the 5th month, I had a complete file. Financial records, recovered messages, witness statements Sophia gathered, and Detective Graves' quiet investigation notes. I had changed my appearance enough to walk through my old town unrecognized. I had practiced what I would say and what I wouldn't say. The old, trusting Elena was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned the true value of silence, patience, and perfect timing. I was almost ready. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and I had already decided exactly how I would walk back into their lives. The final weeks before the wedding became a period of quiet observation and deep internal preparation. I left Ruth's cabin with a heavy but grateful heart, promising to return one day as the woman she helped rebuild. Using cash and careful movement, I settled into a small, nondescript rental cabin 30 miles from Asheville. Sophia left packages with new documents and updates at agreed-upon drop points. From afar, I watched their lives continue. Sophia sent photos of the wedding preparations. Claire trying on dresses. Marcus laughing with friends at the bachelor party, the two of them choosing flowers and tasting cakes. All paid for with my insurance money. Each image hurt, but the pain no longer controlled me. It fueled my clarity. I spent long hours reviewing every piece of evidence, memorizing timelines, and preparing my words. I practiced speaking in front of the small mirror, calm, steady, without accusation or tears. This was not about emotional release. This was about truth delivered with precision. Detective Graves and I communicated through Sophia. He confirmed that the insurance company had flagged the claim for further review based on new information he quietly provided. The pieces were aligning. One evening, I drove to the vineyard under the cover of darkness and sat in the parking lot, watching workers set up chairs and string lights for the ceremony. I didn't feel rage. I felt a profound sense of detachment and purpose. This place that once symbolized our love was now the stage for their betrayal. Soon, it would become the place where their illusion ended. The psychological preparation was the hardest part. I had to confront the parts of me that still wanted to forgive, that still missed the version of Marcus I thought I knew, that still ached for the sister I once loved. I allowed myself to feel those things fully in the quiet of my rental cabin, then released them. I wrote letters I would never send, one to Marcus, one to Claire, and one to the old Elena. In them, I expressed the pain, the disappointment, and the final goodbye. Then I burned them in a small fire behind the cabin, watching the ashes rise into the night sky. I was letting go, not for them, but for myself. Ruth's words echoed often. "Don't let bitterness take you." I chose truth instead. As the wedding day approached, I finalized my plan with Sophia and Detective Graves. I would appear during the ceremony at the exact right moment. Not to cause chaos, but to deliver the undeniable facts. Evidence would be shown on the large screen meant for their romantic photos. The detective and his team would be positioned quietly. The night before the wedding, I sat on the porch of my rental cabin, wrapped in a blanket, looking at the mountains. I felt ready. Not excited. Not vengeful. Just profoundly ready. I had died on that trail. Tomorrow, I would be reborn in front of everyone who had attended my funeral. And this time, no one would write my story for me again. The final week before the wedding was a strange blend of tension and deep inner peace. I moved like a shadow through the edges of my old world. Sophia kept me updated daily while I stayed carefully out of sight. Marcus and Claire were fully immersed in final preparations. They held a lavish rehearsal dinner at the vineyard, complete with toasts about second chances and finding love through tragedy. Claire wore a custom rehearsal dress and my grandmother's pearl earrings. Marcus looked relaxed and proud, raising glasses to their future. I watched from a distance through Sophia's discreet photos and short videos. Each image strengthened my resolve rather than breaking it. Detective Graves met me in person for the first time in a quiet park 2 towns over. He was a serious man in his 50s with kind but sharp eyes. After verifying my identity with personal details only I could know, he laid out the official plan. "We have enough for fraud charges already," he said. "But if you appear at the wedding as planned, we can secure the strongest possible case. Especially with the attempted murder angle, if the trail evidence holds." I nodded calmly. "I don't want chaos, I want truth." He respected that. We coordinated timing perfectly. His team would be positioned around the venue without drawing attention. Back in my cabin, I spent the last nights reviewing my evidence one final time. I prepared a simple, powerful statement. No shouting, no accusations, just facts delivered with quiet dignity. I chose the clothes I would wear. A soft cream dress, similar in style to what the old Elena might have worn, but with a quiet strength in its simplicity. I also prepared something deeply personal. I retrieved the original version of my grandmother's ring. The one I had kept hidden in a safety deposit box Sophia accessed for me. I slipped it on my finger and felt its weight like an anchor to who I truly was. The night before the wedding, Sophia came to my cabin. We sat on the porch together, drinking tea in silence for a long time. "Are you sure about this?" she asked finally. "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied. "They buried me. Tomorrow I rise." She hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Elena. The old you couldn't have done this." "That's because the old me is gone," I said softly. "This version learned how to survive." As she left, I sat alone under the stars, thinking about everything that had happened. The fall, the cabin, the long months of healing, the painful truths. All of it had led to this moment. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't angry. I was ready. Tomorrow, at the exact moment the priest would ask if anyone had objections, I would step forward. Not as a scorned wife seeking revenge, but as a woman reclaiming her life with dignity and undeniable proof. The stage was set. Their perfect day was about to meet the truth they thought they had buried. The wedding day arrived under clear blue skies. I dressed slowly in the quiet cabin, slipping into the elegant cream dress and fastening my grandmother's ring on my finger. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. The woman staring back was calm, composed, and quietly powerful. This was it. I drove to the vineyard and parked far from the main entrance. Sophia met me at a side gate and led me to a discreet position behind the ceremony area. Guests were already seated. Soft music played. Flowers adorned every surface, all paid for with my money. I watched from the shadows as Marcus stood at the altar, looking handsome in his tailored suit. Claire appeared moments later in a stunning white gown, walking slowly down the aisle with a bouquet in her hands. She looked radiant. Happy. The ceremony began. The priest spoke beautifully about love, redemption, and new beginnings. I listened with surprising detachment. Then came the moment. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The words hung in the air. I stepped forward from behind the large oak tree, walking calmly down the side path toward the center aisle. My heels clicked softly on the stone. Heads began to turn. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as people recognized me. Marcus's face went deathly pale. Claire's bouquet slipped from her hands. I continued walking slowly until I stood just a few feet from them. The entire venue was silent except for the soft wind in the trees. "Hello, Marcus. Hello, Claire." My voice was calm, clear, and steady. "I believe I have a few reasons." Whispers erupted. Some guests stood up. A few looked like they might faint. Marcus stammered, This isn't possible. You're dead." I said quietly. But the mountain decided otherwise. I turned to face the guests, my voice carrying across the vineyard without shouting. 6 months ago, I fell off Ridge Trail. While I fought for my life in a stranger's cabin, the 2 people I trusted most buried me and used my life insurance to plan this wedding. Today, I'm not here to stop a marriage with anger. I'm here to offer the truth. At my signal, Sophia activated the large projection screen behind the altar. Instead of romantic photos, documents appeared. Bank transfers, text messages, insurance records, and the detective's preliminary report. Gasps and murmurs grew louder. Claire started crying. Marcus looked like he might be sick. I continued calmly, "I don't hate you. I pity the version of yourselves that believed my death was necessary for your happiness. But I will not let you build your future on my grave." Detective Graves and 2 officers stepped forward quietly from the sides. Marcus tried to run but was gently stopped. Claire sank to her knees in her expensive gown. I looked at them both one last time. "You chose to bury me. Today I choose to live." I turned and walked back down the aisle as chaos erupted behind me. I didn't look back. The truth had finally spoken. In the weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded with quiet inevitability. Marcus and Claire were arrested at the vineyard that day. The evidence was overwhelming. Insurance fraud, conspiracy, and additional charges related to the circumstances of my accident kept them in custody. I didn't attend the trial. Sophia kept me updated. Marcus tried to blame Claire. Claire tried to portray herself as a victim of circumstance. The jury saw through both of them. They were sentenced to significant prison time. The money was returned to me, along with interest and penalties. The luxury cabin project was dissolved. Their reputations were destroyed in the community they had tried so hard to impress. I met with my sister one final time through glass in the county jail. She cried and begged for forgiveness. I listened quietly, then spoke with genuine calm. "I forgive the version of you that was lost and hurting. But I will never forget what you chose to do. I hope you find peace in there. I already have mine out here." With Marcus, there was no meeting. I had nothing left to say. The house, the business, and my grandmother's ring were mine again. But more importantly, my life was mine again. I sold the big cedar house and moved to a smaller, peaceful place closer to the mountains. Ruth came to visit, and we sat on the new porch watching the sunset. She held my hand and said simply, "You did good, child." I smiled. For the first time in a long time, it was real. Today, I live a quieter, more intentional life. I still take my camera into the mountains, but now the photos are only for me. I've learned to trust slowly and carefully. Most importantly, I've learned to trust myself. The fall didn't break me. The betrayal didn't destroy me. They refined me into someone stronger, wiser, and at peace. If you're watching this and carrying the weight of betrayal from someone you loved, I want you to hear this. Your silence is not weakness. Your healing is not selfish. And your comeback does not require their permission. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to choose peace over revenge. and you are allowed to become the version of yourself they never saw coming. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply keep breathing, keep healing, and keep walking forward. The mountains are still there, the trails are still waiting, and so is your next chapter. Write it well.